Hello
Hi.
and welcome to our new issue of the Communications Room, next edition. It's already the third or fourth round that we have in place. And usually at this point in time, Mark is showing his cup, the cup of the day. I think maybe we'll see some of this later. I'll just have the glass today.
Okay.
And as you can see, the glass is half full, which shows that communicators are optimists.
Yes.
And optimism, we found in our recent discussions, is an important aspect also in achieving resonance. And resonance, I would say, is a topic we could discuss today, Mark. What do you think about this?
When I think about resonance, I have a picture in mind that shows at least two parties interacting with each other and having a very uh, uh, fine sensor system in order to really get the messages, the vibes that are coming from the other part. So this for me is resonance. And after the good old communications model that says there is a sender and he sends something, and there's a receiver and he receives something, um, I started to prefer the newer one, which says you only can be sure that you have sent, not that said, that your counterpart has understood what you wanted to send when you listen to the reaction of your counterpart. And this for me is comes into my mind when I hear the word resonance.
Mhm. Okay, thanks. Yeah, and I think resonance, it has probably this individual level on the one hand side. It also has also works on the group level. So when we as communicators enter a room, or also when organizations enter a room or a space somewhere. And this brings me a bit back to this study we did last year with the team of students of Munich University when we interviewed people, and actually found that this is also an aspect that shifted a bit in last year, that in the year 2020, which we call the tipping year in many aspects. But there also this shift happened that looking at the organization from the outside world is becoming more important. And this for me also has to do with resonance. So organizations, companies need to be aware that they are acting in this room, and that they are not acting as individuals or as persons, but they are interacting with many stakeholders out there, and that the stakeholders get more important and more prominent, and also that there is a bigger picture next to the business world we often think of. That is getting more important. So things like the economy, things like the society, or the topic of sustainability, and there I think are the big shifts happening currently. Yes, Mark.
Yeah, that's the development of the topic sustainability has a lot of to do with public opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And in former times, we learned in the very beginning that there's only one target group out there, which is customers. Then there was an additional target group that was somehow to be covered, and was employees. Then there was another additional target group that was investors, and now we have more or less 6 relevant stakeholder groups. And I really like the word stakeholder, as you said, because this reflects that what in former time was a target group now has a mutual influence on a company's success. And I think in our last communications room dialogue, I already mentioned that the sentence of license to operate. And in sensitive technologies, public opinion can be the decisive factor for a license to operate for a whole sector, like in Germany, the nuclear power industry.
Mm.
Public opinion was against it, and now the last few reactors will be shut down in the coming 1 to 2, 3 years, and that was it. So public opinion plays a major role. And then there comes again, as you said, it's not only the individual resonance, but what then happens and what makes it really a new challenge is that you not only enter a resonance room with your customer and it is a closed loop, or with your employees and it's a closed loop, but you have reciprocal influence amongst all those resonance rooms, amongst all those stakeholders. And that makes it even more interesting in my point of view.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely this multi-layers that we need to consider. That makes it also a complex part of business life somehow. So complex on the one hand side, but still on the other hand side also not necessarily complicated if you look at it from a communications viewpoint. And one aspect that plays an important role from my side in this, and we started this discussion on this again in the last room already, is the topic of trust. Because trust, I think, also plays an important role and a decisive role in whether you are able to achieve this resonance in such a room or not. And trust, together with some colleagues, we developed a concept actually of looking at trust also in this multi-layer concept, a bit derived or a bit similar like the spiral dynamics model, but trust is something actually that you can also steer and develop over time by shifting the focus away from yourself to the ecosystem. So it's a development from an ecosystem to an ecosystem, and that's something we all can work on for quite a long time. Maybe, and this is not a journey that ends, but it's we all start our journey from ourselves by looking at us, and then get into a mode, for example, of sharing know-how. Then the next level would be looking at synergizing, bringing resources maybe together, and looking at common topics we can drive together with others. The next step, which is step 4, we called it harmonizing. It's also like it would include adapting capabilities and skills also on such a level. And the final stage somehow might be something like integrating. Then that's I think a term we talked about for quite a while. But it would include actually putting all that we have together into a common pool, also between companies, among companies, and it's the sharing idea and also this cyclical economic model where everyone contributes and brings these things together. That's maybe something to aim for, but most of us, I would say, are somewhere in the middle.
The almost religious foundation was Taylorism, which was specialize, and make every piece as efficient as possible. To get the last cent out of a production, for example. That was obviously successful in a world that was still complicated. Complicated in a way like after World War II, there were 2 blocks in the world. There was the Eastern Bloc, the Western Bloc, and others had to decide whom they would try to support. Or go under their umbrella. So that was more or less a complicated world. And a complicated world is more or less calculable, yeah. The more, and it's then, if you look to physics science, for example, you can easily calculate the reciprocal influence of 2 bodies or planets, for example, or suns or whatever. If you have 3 bodies, it becomes already almost uncalculable. and with more than 3 bodies, it's not possible anymore. So what does that mean for us? That means that we have to come to what you said, things like trust, things like experience, things like probability, things about like curiosity, which means try new things without knowing what the result will be, because you cannot calculate it anymore. And now we have been living in that 20th century thinking for decades, you and I as well. So it was always the silos of specialists. And of course, we have been told there's something like integrated comms from my very beginning in 1995, but I never saw real efforts, as long as I had no influence, to make that become reality. And now with the tipping year, again, we have a real chance to help people understand that there's no need to be frightened to learn and understand that you are a part of a network or an ecosystem, because this opens new opportunities instead of sitting in the silo that tells you this is the place where I am and that defends me against the outside world. So it is a real shift in thinking and understanding the world.
Yeah, so we could say it's also a mindset shift. That brings us back to the topic of attitude that happens on the individual level, but also in this collective room and space, I would say, because now we crossed this tipping point, and it's getting more like a trend or a movement that we most likely will not be able to stop them. So we are on the way to the next level somewhere, and that's positive, like you say. So I think we should look at it from an optimistic viewpoint. It's the next stage of development, and that definitely opens new opportunities for all of us.
Yeah, indeed, and I'm deeply convinced that if you have the right approach to change, you will always win, at least personally. Like, I'm a digital non-native because I'm too old, but I really enjoy to get into the whole stuff of virtual meetings, virtual platforms like Wonder, virtual whiteboards, and how to work with that, and how to make people forget that they are sitting in front of a screen and all that stuff. It's a completely new world, a new language. And this is the reason why I like to dive into that and learn something new. Stay flexible in your head. Let me put it that way. Which is some of my personal targets. Stay flexible in my brain as long as possible. And then you get there and you understand that it's not, for example, a big jump, but still, I make the point here. Charles Darwin did not say that the strongest survive or the most robust survive or those who are most stable, but survival of the fittest meant survival of those who are best capable in adapting to development and to change. And it becomes, if you look at companies, it becomes obvious that it's not the biggest ones, it's not the strongest ones, it's maybe even not the most intelligent ones. It's those who are the fastest and the best in adapting to new developments, to new situations.
Yeah. And this being the fastest in adapting to new ways of working, for example, it also has to do with kind of mental flexibility we need to keep in the organizations also.
And again,
not too structured, stay open, and that also has to do with resonance for me. I would say that we also, as organizations, as companies, move to this level of more last time we called it appreciating, being open to the changes that happen outside, and also taking an active part in the discussions that are taking place. And for example, sustainability is such a topic. So next to COVID-19 and the pandemic, I think this maybe was also one of the main topics we heard a lot about during the last year and still, and also in the years to come. I'm convinced. And that's again one of these opportunities to engage in the discussion, to take an active stance, to explain where you stand as a company, also to explain what you can do, but also maybe what you can't do, and that will be a step-by-step approach to make sustainability happen.
Yeah, I mean, sustainability is a perfect example as well, that you have, if you enter into that dialogue and if you appreciate your partner instead of counterpart, appreciate your partner in the dialogue, then you have to take serious what you say. And we have those almost already those examples of companies doing greenwashing or window dressing, which is then a big hit in their own knee, as we say in German, a big shot in their own knee, and they risk their credibility. And so if you want to do that kind of new communications in that resonance room approach, then you have to be honest, you have to be credible, or you have to earn credibility. And that needs consistency and continuity of what you do and what you say. Because why do we need consistency and continuity to reach credibility? Because we have those reciprocal influences amongst all those resonance rooms that we have to deal with. And this is what then again leads to, on one hand, we have to be more adaptable, flexible, and so on, and what you said, to the new ways of working. So here, agile working is appropriate. There are, of course, and we have discussed it before, there are, of course, other fields where you don't need agile ways of working. So if you have to feed and keep your controlling system according to national law, there's no need to be agile. What for? But in comms, where you live in a complex world and where you cannot calculate, then you take educated guesses based on experience, expertise, probability, and you evaluate those educated guesses where you had to very frequently. And this is part of agile working, as far as I understood.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely, and I would fully confirm this. I just had a brief look at this model I just explained once more, and actually the step that you described, it could be seen as this step from synergizing to harmonizing, because synergies, it's also a term we talked a lot about for years or maybe for decades. That's something companies need to have achieved by now at this level of collaboration, but the next step is also harmonizing these capabilities, and that's what the idea behind this harmonizing. And I think we need this consciousness in organizations, that there are different types of collaboration that are taking place, and maybe agile is not the solution for all, and self-organization is also not the solution for the whole thing. Then there might be this need for organizations to work more on this production type, or maybe administrative tasks, and there are also appropriate ways of working for these types of work, but we need to have the consciousness what is the right way of working in this, and that's something, again, I think all companies can work on and engage in, and it's a type of resonance that will also be there in the marketplace, and also with the employees inside. So because also the employees will see if there is this consciousness in the organization, or if the company leaders stick to the old black and white approach or right and wrong approach.
concerning resonating to one of your stakeholders, I have a very good example just a few kilometers away from where I live in the German countryside. This is someone who deals with musical instruments and all equipment for musical concerts and so on. Thomann started after World War II with one person selling single instruments in his living room, bringing them to his customers on his little motorbike. And today, Thomann is the biggest online dealer for musical equipment worldwide, with 1,700 employees and a billion sales. And what did they do? They opened their ears very, 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 very wide to the customers, to the prospects and the customers. So when you, 20, 30 years ago already, when you entered the sales rooms, if you went to the saxophone department, there were tons of saxophones and you could play them. And even more important, the ones who were there could play the instruments professionally themselves. No matter whether it were saxophones or trombones or trumpets or pianos, whatsoever. There were always professional people there who could easily build a resonance room with their customers because they perfectly understood what the task of the customers were. And then Thomann was one of the first companies to really start online sales, start their online webpage, start a customer call center that is a real customer call center because customers reach experts and so on. So they really, their philosophy is to resonate with the customers the best possible way. They are always trying to improve, and this made them, while being still family owned, the biggest online musical equipment dealer worldwide. In a little village with 20 houses. So this is dedication, this is honesty, this is taking your stakeholders serious in the best possible way, and this is why I have a cup of Thomann today.
So we have the cup today too? Great.
Yeah, so finally I was able to bring in my cup.
Yeah.
So just
Excellent.
one example to show that we are not only theorizing, but we see those examples, and we see, of course, with those whom we are talking to, we see those challenges. Like, okay, we want to move to a different way of working. Are people already there? Are they ready to develop the appropriate mindset, and so on and so on? So it's a discussion that takes place today. Here and today.
Yeah, and that's actually a great example for such a development, actually over a pretty long period of time, I would say. So that really seems to be a consciousness for developing such an approach, and the leaders of this company, I think, seem to have this resonance need in mind, maybe driven by the music or by the company culture that was there from the beginning. And another example I came across recently has indeed to do with the topic of sustainability and banks, because a lot of the banks, I think, they have been criticized for the last decade or more, since the last financial crisis, at least in 2008. And for the banks, it has always been difficult to find their new identity in the new world, and also to describe the impact the bank can make also for the wider society and the economy as a whole. And I have the opportunity to work with a bank in Switzerland at the moment who is taking on this approach actively, and they went into resonance with their stakeholders and acknowledge the need to be active in this space of sustainability, particularly at the immediate customer interface, because they now made the point to say, actually, the customers that we have and we as a bank, we are in the same boat. we both have the challenge to deal with sustainability, and they now want to merge in a mode of co-creating to find solutions together. How can a bank help the customers, or there's the business customer side in that case, to co-create solutions to bring the customers to the next step in terms of sustainability, and at the same time, how can we clarify what our contribution and impact as a bank is that we can make in this space. And that's also just an example. And I think that these types of ideas are in many minds of the leaders these days, and that has to do maybe that showing that we are at this tipping point, or across the tipping point, to get to the new level of collaboration that happens in resonance with stakeholders.
That was a great rounding up of this. Again, way too short dialogue that we had. And yes, I couldn't agree more. The discussions that I have are heading into the same direction, as I said. What we would love to, Hartmut and I, is to discuss with you, dear viewers and listeners. Again, you are invited to join us Fridays, 12:30 German time, Central European time, to join us and discuss with us about all those topics that are related to attitude, co-creation, communicating in resonance rooms, which are all intermingled, and they all have reciprocal influence and strengthen each other and cannot be thought about separately if you want to be best in communications, in today's communications. So please be invited to discuss with us on Fridays at 12:30. You know that we are offering the training on communicationsroom.net. So if you already are convinced that we could be partners for you to take the next steps, don't hesitate to go there and apply. And if you have a personal question, don't hesitate to get in contact with Hartmut or myself. So that was me. That was it for me for today. Hartmut, a final word.
My final word is also just thank you, Mark, for the great summary. I think you brought it to the point, and thanks for everyone for watching, for participating, for listening, and looking forward to seeing you next week. Have a great time.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
See you.
take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.